The smart lock on my garage workshop door clicked open at 2:47 a.m., and I knew my marriage was over. I'd been sitting in the dark for 3 hours, disassembling the overpriced piece of technology that Lila insisted we needed for our modern lifestyle. Funny how a $300 lock becomes worthless when your wife hands out the access code to her boyfriend. My name is Eli Parrish, and I build things for a living. Houses, commercial buildings, trust with clients. I'm good at construction. What I apparently suck at is reading the blueprints of my own life. At 38, I thought I had it figured out. Successful construction company, beautiful wife, nice house in Millbrook, Connecticut. The American dream with smart home features and a 2-car garage. The garage door whispered open, and Lila's BMW slipped inside like a guilty secret. Through the workshop's frosted glass window, I watched her silhouette fumble with her purse, check her phone, then smooth down her hair. Even in shadow, I could see the careful way she moved, like someone trying not to leave evidence. She'd told me she was in Boston for a corporate retreat. HR executives apparently needed a lot of retreating these days. I heard her heels click across the concrete floor, then pause. She'd spotted the light under my workshop door. Eli? Her voice carried that fake, casual tone she used when she was caught off guard. What are you doing up? I opened the door, still holding the dismantled lock mechanism. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd figure out why this thing keeps malfunctioning. Lila stood there in her designer dress, the black one I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. Her makeup was smudged just enough to tell a story, and there was a faint mark on her neck that definitely wasn't there when she left yesterday morning. Your Boston trip end early? I asked, setting the lock parts on my workbench. The sessions were boring. I decided to drive back tonight. She shifted her weight, and I caught a whiff of cologne that wasn't mine. Expensive stuff. The kind that comes in bottles shaped like architectural monuments. That's funny, I said, pulling out my phone. Because I called the Marriott Boston Harbor around 9, the one where your company always books rooms. They said they never had a reservation under Parrish or your maiden name. Her face went through several expressions in quick succession. Surprise, calculation, then that practiced innocence she'd perfected over our 10 years of marriage. They must have made a mistake with the booking system, she said. You know how these corporate accounts work. I nodded slowly, then opened my phone's GPS tracking app. Yeah, corporate accounts are tricky. Almost as tricky as forgetting to turn off location sharing on your phone. The color drained from her face as I turned the screen toward her. A neat little trail of blue dots showed her exact movements over the past 24 hours. Boston wasn't anywhere on that map, but Gavin Knox's lakeside cabin in Millfield was prominently featured, with a nice long stop from 2 p.m. yesterday until about an hour ago. Gavin Knox. My former best friend, former business partner, and current owner of Knox Construction, the company that had been underbidding us on every major project for the past 6 months. Eli, can you explain this too? I reached into my toolbox and pulled out a hotel keycard. Found it in your car last week when I was looking for jumper cables. The Riverside Inn. Cute place. I called them too. Seems you and a mister. Knox have been regular customers for the past 4 months. Lila's composure finally cracked. Her shoulders sagged, and she leaned against the door frame like she needed the support. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Long enough to change all our passwords, move money to accounts you can't access, and install new locks on the house. The smart lock was just for show. I wanted to see if you'd actually use the code I gave you or if you'd gotten a new one from your boyfriend. She straightened up, and I saw a flash of the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. Direct, uncompromising, ready to fight for what she wanted. Unfortunately, what she wanted wasn't me anymore. I wasn't planning for it to happen, she said. Gavin and I started talking at the Chamber of Commerce mixer 6 months ago. You remember, the night you said you were too tired to go? So this is my fault for working late? It's nobody's fault, Eli. Sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes they find someone who understands them better. I laughed, and it came out harder than I intended. Understands you better? Lila, the man tried to steal 3 of our biggest clients last year. He understands you perfectly. You're both ambitious, ruthless, and apparently perfect for each other. Don't be cruel. Cruel? I haven't even started being cruel. I walked over to my workbench and picked up her phone, which I'd lifted from her purse while she was explaining her fake Boston trip. Want to hear cruel? Let me read you some of the text messages you've been sending. Her eyes went wide. You went through my phone? Honey, I've been going through everything. Your emails, your credit card statements, your browser history. Did you know that Google Maps saves every location you visit? It's been very educational. I scrolled through her messages, finding the conversation thread with Gavin. Here's a good one from last Tuesday. Can't wait to get away from Eli's boring construction talk and feel like a real woman again. That stung a little. Eli, please. Oh, but this one's even better. From 3 weeks ago. Once we merge the companies, we can buy that house in Greenwich. Eli will never see it coming. I looked up at her. Merge the companies? Were you planning to let me in on that decision? Or was I supposed to figure it out when I showed up to work and found a Knox construction sign on my building? Lila's face had gone from pale to flushed. It's not what you think. Gavin has connections, bigger projects. We could all benefit. We? There is no we anymore, Lila. There's you, there's your boyfriend, and there's me. And I'm done being the third wheel in my own marriage. I walked over to the garage door opener and hit the button. The door rumbled up, letting in the cool October night air. I suggest you call Gavin and tell him you need a place to stay, because you're not sleeping in my house tonight. This is half my house, Eli. You can't just throw me out. Actually, I can. See, while you were busy planning my professional funeral, I was doing some planning of my own. Turns out that prenup your daddy insisted we sign works both ways. Adultery voids your claim to marital assets. I've got photos, credit card receipts, hotel records, and about 50 text messages that would make a divorce lawyer weep with joy. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to find an angle that would let her salvage something from this wreckage. What do you want? She finally asked. I want you gone. Tonight. Take whatever clothes you need, but leave your keys, your credit cards, and your access codes to everything. You can come back tomorrow with a lawyer if you want your stuff, but you don't live here anymore. And then what? You're just going to pretend the last 10 years never happened? I looked at her standing there in the dress I'd bought her, holding the phone full of messages to another man, asking me to pretend that betrayal was just a minor inconvenience. No, I said. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what happened. Starting with Gavin's wife. The blood drained from her face again. You wouldn't. Try me. She stood there for another moment, then walked to her car without another word. I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing around the corner like the last 10 years of my life. I went back into the workshop and sat down at my bench, surrounded by the pieces of the smart lock. Such a simple device, really. A few circuits, a wireless receiver, a motor to turn the deadbolt. The manufacturer promised it would keep your home secure, but they never mentioned what to do when the threat was already inside. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. This isn't over. G. I smiled and typed back. You're right. It's just getting started. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my kitchen with a pot of coffee and Lila's phone, documenting 10 years of marriage, dissolving into spreadsheets and screenshots. The phone was a goldmine. Lila had never been good with technology. She treated passwords like suggestions and privacy settings like optional accessories. Her text messages with Gavin went back 6 months, starting with innocent, great meeting you pleasantries and escalating into detailed plans for both my personal and professional destruction. But the real treasure was her group chat with her friends, Vanessa Chen, her college roommate and current partner in social climbing, Monica Walsh, whose husband owned the biggest accounting firm in town, Sarah Brennan, who worked at the bank where we kept our business accounts. These women had been in my house. I'd grilled steaks for their husbands. I'd listened to their complaints about contractors and home renovations, never knowing they were gathering intelligence for my wife's exit strategy. The messages painted a picture that made my stomach turn. Lila hadn't just been cheating, she'd been planning a complete takeover. Gavin would get my business contacts and ongoing projects. Lila would get the house and half of everything else, plus whatever she could hide before the divorce papers were filed. Her friends were helping with everything from asset searches to recommendations for aggressive divorce attorneys. "Eli's so trusting," she'd written to the group 3 weeks ago. "He still thinks we're just going through a rough patch. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll have everything locked up." Vanessa had replied, "Men like him never see it coming. They're too busy playing with their tools to notice their wives playing with other men." The casual cruelty of it hit me harder than the affair itself. These people had been laughing at me for months, treating my marriage like a business deal they were negotiating behind my back. At 6 a.m., I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I saw Harriet Murphy climbing out of her ancient Honda Civic, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a box of donuts from Murphy's Bakery. Harriet had been running the office at Parish Construction for 15 years, ever since I'd bought out my previous partner, and needed someone who could handle both bookkeeping and the occasional contractor who thought workplace harassment was a suggestion. She knocked once and walked in, as was her habit. Harriet had keys to everything and the authority to use them. "You look like hell," she said, setting the coffee and donuts on my kitchen table. "Rough night?" "Lila's been having an affair with Gavin Knox." Harriet sat down across from me and opened the donut box. "I know." "You know?" "Eli, honey, I've been managing your calendar for 15 years. When your wife starts scheduling mysterious appointments and your biggest competitor starts bidding on jobs like he's got inside information, it doesn't take a detective to connect the dots." She pulled out a chocolate-glazed donut and took a deliberate bite. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I showed her Lila's phone and the screenshots I'd been taking. "Document everything, file for divorce, try to save the business." "That's the legal approach," Harriet said. "What about the personal approach?" Meaning Gavin Knox has been trying to destroy your company for 2 years. He's stolen 3 major clients, poached your best foreman, and now he's stolen your wife. The legal system will give you a divorce and maybe some financial compensation, but it won't give you justice. I looked at this 60-year-old woman who'd been like a mother to me since my own parents died and realized she was suggesting something that went well beyond filing paperwork. "What did you have in mind?" Gavin's weakness has always been his ego. He needs everyone to know how successful he is, how much smarter he is than everyone else. That's why he drives that ridiculous sports car and lives in that glass house by the lake. So people with glass houses shouldn't throw stones, but sometimes stones get thrown at them. She finished her donut and reached for another. "Tell me about the group chat." I showed her the messages between Lila and her friends, the casual way they'd discuss dismantling my life like they were planning a dinner party. Harriet read in silence, her expression getting darker with each screenshot. When she finished, she set the phone down and looked at me with the kind of cold anger I'd only seen her direct at contractors who tried to cheat us. "These women think they're untouchable because they've got money and social connections," she said. "They're about to learn that small towns have long memories and sharp tongues." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Vanessa Chen's husband doesn't know she's been helping your wife hide assets. I'm thinking Monica Walsh's husband doesn't know she's been sharing confidential banking information. And I'm thinking Sarah Brennan's boss at the bank would be very interested to know she's been discussing customer accounts with unauthorized parties." I stared at her. "You want to destroy all of them?" "I want to give them the same consideration they gave you." She stood up and brushed crumbs off her hands. "But first we need to secure the business. If Gavin thinks he's going to waltz in and take over your contracts, He's got another thing coming. We spent the next hour going through my business files, identifying which projects Gavin might target and which clients might be vulnerable to his poaching attempts. Parish construction wasn't huge. We employed about 20 people and handled mid-sized commercial and residential projects, but we'd built a solid reputation over 15 years. The Morrison office building is our biggest vulnerability, Harriet said, spreading contracts across my kitchen table. It's a $2 million project, and we're only 3 months in. If Gavin can convince them we're unreliable, they could terminate the contract and hire him to finish the work. How would he do that? Same way he's been doing everything else, through Lila. She's got access to your project files, your scheduling software, your client contact information. She could sabotage the Morrison project without breaking a sweat. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. She wouldn't. Eli, she's been planning to steal your entire business. You think she'd hesitate to sabotage one project? My phone rang. The caller ID showed Knox Construction. I looked at Harriet, who nodded. I answered on speaker. Eli Parrish. Eli, it's Gavin. His voice had that forced, casual tone people use when they're trying to pretend everything is normal. I think we need to talk. Do we? Look, I know this situation is complicated, but we're both adults here. We should be able to work something out that's fair to everyone. Fair to everyone? That's interesting. I looked at Harriet, who was taking notes. What did you have in mind? Well, obviously there are going to be some changes, personal changes. But that doesn't mean our professional relationship has to suffer. Our professional relationship? Gavin, we haven't had a professional relationship since you started underbidding every job I quoted and trying to steal my clients. Competition is healthy, Eli. It keeps us all sharp. But maybe it's time we considered a different approach. A partnership, maybe. Pool our resources, share the bigger projects. I almost laughed. You mean the merger that you and Lila have been planning for months? There was a long pause. She told you about that? She didn't have to. I read her text messages, all of them. Another pause, longer this time. Eli, I think you're overreacting. Maybe we should meet in person, talk this through like reasonable people. Reasonable people don't sleep with their friends' wives. Look, I'm sorry about how this happened. But Lila and it's real, Eli. It's not just some fling. We're talking about a future together. A future built on my business and my money. That's not... Here's what's going to happen, Gavin. You're going to stay away from my wife, my business, and my clients. And if I find out you've been using information Lila gave you to interfere with my projects, I'm going to make your life very complicated. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you. There's a difference. I hung up and looked at Harriet. Think he bought it? He thinks you're a heartbroken husband who's going to roll over and let him take everything. That's exactly what we want him to think. She gathered up the contracts and headed for the door. I'll be at the office early. We need to change all the passwords and security codes before Lila tries to access anything. And Eli? Yeah? This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Make sure you're ready for that. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the debris of my marriage and the blueprints for my revenge. Outside, Millbrook was waking up, neighbors heading to work, kids walking to school, the normal rhythm of a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. By tomorrow, they'd all know mine too. But if I played this right, they'd also know Gavin's and Lila's, and the story they heard wouldn't be the one my wife and her boyfriend were planning to tell. I picked up Lila's phone and started making a list of everyone in her contacts. It was time to start building something new, not a house or an office building, but a foundation for justice that would be strong enough to support the weight of what I was about to do. 3 days later, I was ready for war. Harriet had worked her magic at the office, securing our systems and reaching out to key clients with reassurances about project timelines. Dale Morrison, my lead foreman, had quietly spread the word among the crew that anyone caught talking to Knox Construction about our projects would be looking for a new job. The business was as protected as I could make it. But protection wasn't enough. I wanted Gavin and Lila to pay for what they'd done, and I wanted everyone in Millbrook to see it happen. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Every Thursday night, the local business association met at O'Malley's pub for what they called networking, but was really just an excuse to drink beer and complain about town politics. Gavin never missed it. He used the meetings to scout for new clients and show off whatever expensive toy he'd bought that week. I hadn't been to one of these meetings in months, which made my appearance at 7 p.m. that Thursday something of an event. Conversation stopped as I walked in, and I could feel the weight of curious stares following me to the bar. "Eli Parrish," said Tom Bradley, who owned the biggest insurance agency in town. "Haven't seen you here in a while." "Been busy," I said, ordering a beer, but I figured it was time to be more social. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lila had been after me for years to attend more of these networking events, to build relationships, and raise my profile in the community. Now I was finally taking her advice, just not for the reasons she'd intended. Gavin was holding court at a corner table, surrounded by the usual crowd of admirers and wannabes. He looked good, expensive suit, perfect hair, the kind of confident smile that came from never having to worry about money. When he saw me, his expression flickered for just a moment before settling back into practiced charm. "Eli." He stood up and walked over with his arms spread wide, like we were old friends meeting after a long absence. "Good to see you out and about." "Gavin." I didn't move to shake his hand or return his fake enthusiasm. "How's business?" "Can't complain." We just landed the new shopping center project out on Route 7. $2.5 million. He said it loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "How about you? Still working on that office building downtown?" "Still working. Still getting paid." I took a sip of my beer and looked around the room. You know, it's funny how these big projects come together. All the relationships, all the inside information you need to put together a competitive bid. Something shifted in his expression. "Well, you know how it is. It's all about knowing the right people, being in the right place at the right time. Or sleeping with the right person." The conversations around us stopped. Tom Bradley nearly choked on his drink. Gavin's face went red, then pale. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." I set my beer down and turned to face him fully. "See, I've been wondering how you always seem to know exactly what to bid on my projects. Always just a few thousand under my quote, always with the exact specifications the client wants. It was like you had inside information. Eli, I think you've had enough to drink." "I haven't even finished my first beer, Gavin." "But you're right. I have had enough. Enough of you stealing my clients, enough of you poaching my employees, and definitely enough of you screwing my wife." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the bartender stopped wiping glasses to stare at us. Gavin looked around the room, realizing that every conversation had stopped and every eye was on him. "I don't know what you think you know," he said quietly, "but you're making a mistake." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I'd prepared. "Let me read you something. This is from a text message sent 3 weeks ago. Can't wait to celebrate the Morrison contract with you tomorrow night. Eli has no idea how much information he leaves lying around his home office." Gavin's face went white. "Where did you get that?" "From Lila's phone. Want to hear more?" I scrolled through the screenshots. "Here's a good one. Gavin says he can get the Route 7 project if I can find out what Parish Construction is bidding. I told him that won't be a problem." The room was dead quiet. I could hear the traffic outside, the hum of the beer coolers, the sound of Gavin's reputation crashing to the floor. That's taken out of context," he stammered. "Is it? How about this one? Once we get rid of Eli, we can merge the companies and control half the construction business in town. He's too trusting to see it coming." Tom Bradley set his drink down hard. Jesus, Gavin. It's not what it sounds like, Gavin said, looking around the room desperately. Eli, you're upset. I understand that, but what? But I should just accept that my wife and my former friend have been planning to destroy my business while they're having an affair. We never meant for it to happen this way. Which part? The affair or the industrial espionage? He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't make it worse. You want to know the really funny part? I continued. Lila thought she was so smart, planning this whole thing. But she never bothered to check whether I'd changed the locks on the house, or moved money out of our joint accounts, or documented every text message and email she sent. I pulled out a manila envelope and set it on the bar. Copies of everything. The affair, the business espionage, the plans to steal my clients and destroy my company. I've already given copies to my lawyer, my accountant, and the police. The police? Gavin's voice cracked. Turns out that using confidential business information obtained through personal relationships to gain an unfair competitive advantage is actually illegal. Who knew? The crowd around us had grown. Word was spreading through the bar that something big was happening, and people were abandoning their own conversations to listen to mine. Eli, look, Gavin said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Maybe we can work something out. Privately, like adults. Adults? I laughed, and it came out louder and harsher than I intended. Adults don't stab their friends in the back. Adults don't steal other people's wives and businesses. Adults take responsibility for their actions. What do you want? I want everyone in this room to know exactly what kind of man you are. I want your clients to know that you've been using stolen information to underbid honest contractors. And I want your wife to know that while she's been taking care of your kids, you've been planning a future with my wife. Gavin's face went gray. You called Rebecca? I didn't have to. She'll find out tomorrow morning when the story runs in the Millbrook Gazette. Local businessman caught in affair and business espionage scheme. It's got a nice ring to it, don't you think? You bastard. No, Gavin. I'm the guy who trusted you. I'm the guy who considered you a friend even after you started competing with me. I'm the guy who would have helped you if you'd asked, instead of trying to steal everything I've worked for. I picked up my beer and finished it in one long swallow. But now I'm the guy who's going to make sure everyone knows what you really are. He took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually take a swing. Part of me hoped he would. It would make the story even better. But Tom Bradley stepped between us. That's enough, both of you. This isn't over, Gavin said, his voice shaking with rage. You're right, I replied. It's not. Tomorrow morning, when your wife reads the paper and your clients start calling with questions, that's when it really starts. I left him standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of his reputation and the stares of people who would never look at him the same way again. As I walked out of O'Malley's, I could hear the conversations starting up behind me, excited whispers, shocked exclamations, the sound of gossip taking flight. By tomorrow, everyone in Millbrook would know the story. By next week, it would be the only story anyone was talking about. And by next month, Gavin Knox would understand exactly what it felt like to have your life destroyed by someone you trusted. I drove home through the quiet streets of my town, past the houses I'd helped build and the businesses I'd helped renovate, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: satisfaction. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to start building something that would last. The story broke in the Millbrook Gazette on Friday morning, and by noon, my phone was ringing every 5 minutes. Clients calling to confirm their projects were secure. Competitors offering sympathy that sounded more like fishing expeditions. Reporters from the regional papers wanting to know more about the construction industry scandal. But the most satisfying call came at 2:30 p.m. when my phone displayed Knox Construction. Eli, it's Rebecca Knox. Gavin's wife sounded tired and angry in equal measure. I think we need to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the diner on Main Street? In an hour? I found Rebecca sitting in a corner booth, looking like she hadn't slept. She was a good woman. I'd always liked her. She taught third grade at the elementary school, coached girls' soccer on weekends, and somehow managed to raise 3 kids while her husband played big-shot businessman around town. I'm sorry, she said, as I sat down across from her. I'm sorry this happened to you, and I'm sorry I didn't know what Gavin was doing. You don't have anything to apologize for. Don't I? She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm them. I knew something was wrong. He was working late more often, taking calls he wouldn't explain, buying expensive things we couldn't afford. I didn't want to know, you know? I didn't want to deal with it. Rebecca, no, let me finish. She looked up at me, and I could see the anger burning behind her exhaustion. I read the text messages you gave to the newspaper. All of them. The affair with Lila, the plans to steal your business, the way they talked about you like you were some kind of obstacle to get around. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I found these in Gavin's home office this morning. Copies of your project files, client contact lists, financial records. He's been planning this for months. I opened the envelope and felt my anger spike all over again. Everything was there. Detailed information about my ongoing projects, notes about my clients' preferences and budgets, even copies of my employee contracts. There's more, Rebecca continued. I called our accountant this morning. Gavin's been moving money out of our joint accounts, setting up new business entities, preparing to leave me with nothing while he starts over with your wife. What are you going to do? I'm going to destroy him. Her voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. I'm going to take everything he cares about and burn it to the ground just like he was planning to do to you. Over the next hour, Rebecca laid out a plan that was both elegant and ruthless. She had access to all of Knox Construction's financial records, client files, and business communications. More importantly, she had legal standing to act on behalf of the company as Gavin's spouse and business partner. The Route 7 shopping center project, she said, sliding a contract across the table. Gavin bid it using information he stole from you. The contract is invalid if it was obtained through fraudulent means. Can you prove that? I can prove he had your confidential project files before he submitted his bid. I can prove he used information obtained through his relationship with your wife. And I can prove he lied about Knox Construction's capacity to handle a project that size. She pulled out more documents, financial statements, employee records, equipment inventories. Gavin's been living beyond our means for 2 years, trying to look more successful than he really is. Knox Construction is leveraged to the breaking point. If we lose the Route 7 project, the company goes under. And if the company goes under? Gavin loses everything. The business, the house, the cars, his reputation, all of it. She smiled, and it wasn't a particularly pleasant expression. Just like he was planning to do to you. We spent another hour going through the details. Rebecca would file complaints with the State Licensing Board, the Better Business Bureau, and the District Attorney's Office. She would contact Knox Construction's clients and inform them about the fraudulent bidding practices. Most importantly, she would freeze all company assets and file for divorce, leaving Gavin with no money to fight back. What about Lila? I asked. What about her? She's about to find out that her rich boyfriend is actually broke and facing criminal charges. Think she'll stick around for that? I doubted it. Lila had married me when I was a struggling contractor with big dreams and a small bank account, but she'd grown accustomed to success and security. A disgraced businessman facing bankruptcy and possible jail time wasn't exactly her type. There's one more thing, Rebecca said as we prepared to leave. Gavin's been bragging about the Route 7 project to everyone who'll listen. There's a celebration party tomorrow night at the country club. All the big contractors, city officials, potential clients. He's planning to announce Knox Construction's expansion into commercial development. Sounds like poor timing. It would be a shame if someone showed up with evidence that the whole thing was built on fraud. I looked at this elementary school teacher who was calmly planning to destroy her husband's life and career, and realized that I'd seriously underestimated her. Gavin had made the same mistake. He'd assumed that his quiet, loyal wife would never fight back. We were both learning that assumption was dangerously wrong. "I'll be there," I said. "Good. Bring copies of everything, the text messages, the stolen files, the financial records. Make sure everyone sees exactly what Gavin Knox is really made of." As I drove home, I thought about the party tomorrow night. All of Millbrook's business elite would be there, celebrating what they thought was Gavin's biggest success. Instead, they'd be witnessing his complete destruction. It was going to be beautiful. That evening, I sat in my workshop, organizing the evidence that would end Gavin's career. Text messages, financial records, stolen business files, everything laid out in chronological order, telling the story of betrayal and fraud that had nearly cost me everything. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This won't bring her back. G." I typed back, "Don't want her back. Just want you gone." The response came quickly. "See you tomorrow night." I smiled and set the phone aside. Tomorrow night was going to be very interesting indeed. The Millbrook Country Club was packed by the time I arrived at 7 p.m. Saturday evening. Gavin had spared no expense for his celebration: open bar, catered dinner, live music, and a guest list that included every important business owner and city official in town. The banner hanging over the entrance read, "Knox Construction, building the future of Millbrook." I wondered if he'd change that slogan after tonight. I dressed for the occasion. My best suit, the one Lila had bought me for our anniversary 2 years ago. It seemed appropriate to wear something she'd chosen for what would probably be the last public appearance of our marriage. Rebecca Knox was already there, playing the role of the supportive wife to perfection. She stood next to Gavin as he worked the room, shaking hands and accepting congratulations, smiling at all the right moments. No one looking at her would guess that she was about to detonate her husband's life. "Eli!" Gavin spotted me across the room and walked over with his arms spread wide, that same fake enthusiasm he'd shown at O'Malley's. But this time, there was something desperate underneath it. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, looking around at the crowd. Hell of a turnout. Must have cost a fortune. You know what they say, you have to spend money to make money. Speaking of money, how's business been lately? Really, I mean, not the public relations version. His smile faltered slightly. "Business is good. Great, actually. The Route 7 project is just the beginning." "That's interesting, because I heard Knox Construction is having some cash flow problems. Overextended on credit, behind on supplier payments, that sort of thing." "Where did you hear that?" "Small town. Word gets around." I smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "But hey, I'm sure the Route 7 money will solve all those problems, assuming you get to keep the contract." "What's that supposed to mean?" Before I could answer, the evening's MC tapped the microphone on the small stage at the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. Our host would like to say a few words." Gavin looked at me for another moment, then walked to the stage. The crowd gathered around, drinks in hand, ready to hear about Millbrook's bright commercial future. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Gavin began, his voice carrying easily through the room. 2 years ago, I started Knox Construction with a simple goal: to bring world-class commercial development to our community. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that we've achieved that goal. Applause filled the room. I noticed Rebecca standing near the back, her expression carefully neutral. "The Route 7 shopping center will be the largest commercial project in Millbrook's history," Gavin continued. $2.5 million, 40 stores, 300 jobs. It represents everything Knox Construction stands for: innovation, excellence, and commitment to our community. More applause. I waited until it died down, then raised my hand. "Gavin, I have a question." He looked surprised but gestured for me to continue. "Of course, Eli. What's on your mind?" "I'm curious about your bidding process for the Route 7 project. How did you know exactly what specifications to include in your proposal?" The room went quiet. Gavin's smile became strained. "Well, we did our research. Market analysis, client needs assessment, that sort of thing." Market analysis. That's interesting. I pulled out my phone and opened one of the screenshots I'd prepared. Because I have a text message here from 3 weeks ago that suggests a different explanation. "Eli, I don't think this is the appropriate—" The message is from Lila Parrish to someone identified as G in her contacts. I looked up at the crowd, making sure I had everyone's attention. It says, and I quote, "Got the Route 7 specs from Eli's files. Client wants LEED certification and underground parking. Bid accordingly." The silence was absolute. I could see people looking back and forth between Gavin and me, trying to process what they'd just heard. That's taken out of context," Gavin said, his voice cracking slightly. "Is it?" I scrolled to another message. Here's another one. "Eli bid $2.7 million for Route 7. Come in at 2.5 and it's yours. Sent 2 days before the bidding deadline." Mayor Patterson, who'd been standing near the front of the crowd, stepped forward. "Are you saying that Knox Construction had access to confidential bidding information?" "I'm saying that Gavin Knox has been using information stolen from my company to underbid my projects for months." I pulled out the manila envelope Rebecca had given me. I have documentation of everything. Stolen client files, copied project specifications, financial records illegally obtained through personal relationships. "This is ridiculous," Gavin said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Eli's upset about his personal situation, and he's trying to—" "My personal situation?" I laughed. "You mean the fact that you've been sleeping with my wife while planning to steal my business?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rebecca stepped forward, her timing perfect. "It's all true," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "I found the evidence in my husband's office this morning. Stolen files, copied contracts, detailed plans to destroy Parish Construction and take over their clients." She walked to the stage and handed a thick folder to Mayor Patterson. "Gavin's been using information obtained through his affair with Lila Parrish to gain an unfair advantage in the bidding process. The Route 7 contract was awarded based on fraudulent information." Mayor Patterson opened the folder and began reading. His expression grew darker with each page. "Furthermore," Rebecca continued, "Knox Construction doesn't have the financial resources to complete the Route 7 project. My husband has been hiding the company's true financial condition while pursuing contracts we can't afford to fulfill." "That's enough," Gavin shouted from the stage. "Rebecca, you don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" She turned to face him, and her voice was ice cold. "I know you've been moving money out of our joint accounts. I know you've been lying to clients about our capacity. And I know you've been planning to abandon your family for a woman who's only interested in your money. Money you don't actually have." The crowd was buzzing now, excited whispers spreading through the room like wildfire. This was better than anything they could have seen on television. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Patterson announced, "in light of these allegations, the city will be conducting a full investigation of the Route 7 project bidding process. Until that investigation is complete, the contract with Knox Construction is suspended." Gavin's face went white. "You can't do that. I have contracts, commitments." "You have nothing," I said, walking closer to the stage. "Your company is broke, your reputation is destroyed, and your wife is about to divorce you and take whatever's left. This isn't over, Eli." "Yes, it is." I looked around the room at all the faces staring back at me, clients, competitors, city, officials, all witnessing the complete destruction of Gavin Knox's career. "It's been over since the moment you decided to betray our friendship." I turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Gavin standing alone on the stage in front of a room full of people who would never trust him again. As I reached the door, I heard Rebecca's voice one last time. "The party's over, everyone. Please feel free to finish your drinks, but Knox Construction has nothing left to celebrate." Outside, the October air was crisp and clean. I stood in the country club parking lot, looking up at the stars and feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. My phone buzzed with a text message from Lila. "We need to talk." I typed back, "No, we don't. Your boyfriend is broke and facing criminal charges. Your friends are about to be investigated for their role in this mess, and your marriage is over. I think that covers everything." The response came quickly. "Please, Eli. I made a mistake." I smiled and typed my final message. "Yes, you did. You picked the wrong man to betray." Then I blocked her number and drove home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, past the houses and businesses that would still be there long after Gavin Knox and Lila Parrish were forgotten footnotes in the town's history. Justice, it turned out, was a lot like construction. You had to lay a solid foundation, build it piece by piece, and make sure every joint was tight and every measurement was perfect. But when you were done, you had something that would stand the test of time, and what I'd built tonight would last forever. Ver, 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 ver.